Hey guys, Scott here. Today we're going to go over notorious right-wing grifter MintSkull's opinions on my opinions on opinions about opinions. We're so in deep about this has killer gotten harder discussion that I don't even know where it started at this point, but I really like doing this stuff. If you guys are sick of this topic by now, you click off this video. I don't blame you. This is the past 3 videos of mine now, but I really love ongoing debates about this stuff. And I know MintSkull really likes it too. So I think this is something that just really benefits both of us as we both really like talking about this stuff. So I find this stuff really fun to talk about. If you're tired of it, that's fine. Before I actually go into what he has said about my opinions on the topic, I want to just very quickly, since I know most people don't watch past 40 seconds of a video and just immediately start commenting, I was looking at some of his comments, and I just have to illustrate just one thing. Let me read a couple of these comments here. The problem with Scott's opinion is that purely subjective in that he's playing in high MMR when the matches are way different compared to mid and low MMR games. His mentality on the subject is, since I'm not experiencing it just must mean that it's not true. Scott has felt like mold breaker content for a while now. All his videos seem to be, this is what the community thinks, and this is why they're all wrong. No hate to him. Do what you want and all. He seems chill. I can't really stand watching his videos anymore because they're always, this is why your opinion is wrong for every subject. Scott's been pissing me off. I have no problems with him personally, but his videos are starting to feel like this is the problem with DBD, and I'm going to tell you you're wrong, and I'm right based off of my gameplay mostly. I get he's good at the game. He just comes off as arrogant and annoying a lot now. Everyone is wrong, and I am right kind of person. Okay, so there's a lot more of these types of comments. Here is the first 20 seconds of the video MintSkull is reacting to. And let me be clear first off, saying I'm not going to sit here on an arrogant hill and say, no, your experience is wrong. I can't tell you what your experience has been. All I can do is hopefully provide evidence that things really have not changed very much at all. And some of the things that people are complaining about are actually good, not bad. So that's all I can do. But obviously, I can't change what your perception of the difficulty of these matches has been. If you're finding the games harder, then that's accurate to you. What the fuck are you guys talking about? It's just one of my biggest pet peeves is people just commenting on shit that they have not even watched. It's so frustrating. I don't even feel like being nice to these people. If you're doing this shit and saying that I'm doing the things that I'm explicitly in the first 20 seconds saying that I am not doing, just fuck off. You're just so annoying. Just stop doing that. Oh my God. Anyway, let's go into the actual discussion with MintSkull, who is very respectful. I love MintSkull. He's a very good YouTuber. I saw a lot of people attacking him for the thumbnail he used. Like, he messaged me before this, and we were cracking up about it because it's so unlike something he would say. I just found it fucking hilarious. So I gave him the good graces to post it, and people are attacking him for it, saying he's making it political. Like, dude, it's so clearly satire. Just relax. Anyway, let's go over the actual points he brought up in countering mine. I think the game really has not gotten harder for Killer. He and a lot of other people have said that the game has gotten harder. So let's go over his points and I'll try to defend them. The first main point, he talks about my main point where because there's, less giving up, that means there's harder games. I said it really isn't changing the outcomes very much. And the reasoning I used were most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time when people were to disconnect, the game is usually kind of decided already at that point. And I brought up the example, and he also discussed my exact example as well. So we're on the same page of, if you get it down in the first 20 seconds of the match, 9 out of 10 times the killer is gonna win that match. Again, not every time. And I feel like, unfortunately, even though he included and clipped me saying this is certainly not what happens every time, it's not very black and white, he definitely kind of addressed the argument as if I was making it very black and white. When, again, like in the video and even when he clipped me in, I understand this is not something that happens every time. I have absolutely lost games where I had an immensely good start. And I'm not saying that never happens. I'm just saying most of the time, statistically, if you were to get it down in the first 20 seconds of the match, you're going to win as killer. That's just kind of how the game works. I don't even think MintSkull would disagree with me on that one. I think most good killer players would agree that if you get it down in the first 20 seconds, that's so much pressure that it's very difficult for survivors to come back from, but not impossible. So as a counter argument, MintSkull actually included this game on RPD where he's playing Vecna, where he got a very, very quick down at the start, and just due to some really good Mimic RNG, he was able to get it down very quickly as Vecna, and he would still go on to lose the game. And he used this as a defense for that, saying just because you have, a really good start doesn't mean it's a foregone conclusion, doesn't mean you're going to win, which again, we're not really disagreeing. I said most of the time, not all of the time. If it happens 9 out of 10 times, then this could have just been the 1 out of 10. So we're really not disagreeing with much here. He's just using the 1 out of 10, in my opinion, as an example, as a counter argument. And that's fine, even if he has more than that. Maybe it's 2 out of 10s, 80%, like whatever. We're talking about just numbers here. But I think he would agree majority of the time the killer is going to come out on top of these scenarios. So my whole original point was if people are DCing or not, if you get it down that quickly and they DC or don't, the outcome of the match is most of the time going to be the same. So it's really not having a huge impact on the game's, kill rates and win rates and things like that. That's all I'm trying to say here. The problem was he says one particular line here.
Here is a match of me playing Vecna in the anniversary game mode, which is killer-sided, and I get a down 15 seconds in the match. In the past, the Nia would have given up because this situation was bull. Can you guess the outcome of the match? I lost, because both Geralt and Sable were amazing players that took me in long chases and knew Vecna's counterplay, and I didn't try hard.
Where he basically says, yeah, he lost that match where he had a really good start, but he wasn't really trying that hard. And as soon as you say that, the entire argument just kind of fails. Because all of this is predicated on the notion that you're trying to win your match. You can't use this as a counter argument if you are having an incredibly good start, and because of the good start, you dial it back and you play way more chill, you play way more nice, and all of a sudden you end up still losing. Well, it's not the game's fault. That's just you decided to be nicer. And I know because I've done this too. I've had really good starts and I'll try to play really nice on a weaker killer. I try to 12 hook. Suddenly I'm at 1 gen left. I'm like, oh, fuck, I shouldn't have done that. I should have actually, killed people. And then I end up losing that game. That does happen. But I'm not sitting here going, that's because the game is unfair. It's because I personally decided to be nicer. Just like he decided to not be sweaty. He decided to not try hard there. If that's the case, that's not on the game anymore. That's on you just being nice. And trust me, I wish there was more of that. That's wonderful. But that's not because the game is hard. It's because you decided to be nice about it. So when I say a statement like, if you get it down in the first 20 seconds, it's going to be a foregone conclusion most of the time that you're going to win that match. There's an asterisk there that says, assuming you keep trying to win the match you're in. If you just stop trying, then no balancing discussion matters anymore. I got a 0K with Nurse. Nurse must be weak. How did you lose? I wasn't really trying. It's like, it doesn't mean anything anymore. All of these arguments only work if you're trying to win and are unable to do so in that scenario. So I don't really think you're disagreeing with me here. I think in that example you provided on RPD with Vecna, if you did really try to win there and you gave it your all, it would be a foregone conclusion. You would win that game because of the advantage you had at the start. It would be enough to propel you to victory if you really kept trying to win. But because you wanted to play casually, which again, I respect, I try to do that too, you ended up losing that game. But I would argue that's not the game's fault. That is kind of on you for being a nice, good guy. And it's so weird to blame you for that, but that is... You get what I'm trying to say here. It's really hard to maintain this argument when you're not trying to win or trying to do everything you can do to win in these types of scenarios here. So, blanket statement, I'm just saying most of the time, if you get a very early down, whether the person DCs or not, you're going to win. I don't think he would disagree with that claim as well. I think he thinks it happens a bit less frequently. I think it happens a bit more frequently. But at that point, we're just splitting hairs about anecdotal experiences, and you can't win any argument in that. Because like I said, we're just going anecdotal here. So it's not a big deal here. The one thing I will absolutely concede on that, though, is it's kind of an obvious point, and I didn't say it, but he said it, and I'll talk about it. In the scenario where you might have had someone DC or give up early, and that would have been a 3v1, or they don't give up, but you're still having such a good start, you still win. Same outcome. But still, he said that in the game that is more likely to be a 4-man now because of less, people giving up, that game will be harder than the 3-man. Which of course it will. 4 is a bigger number than 3. There's no possible way I can make the argument that the 3-man game is going to be harder than the 4-man game. So if that's the argument he and other players are trying to make where, yeah, we're still winning, these matches are still going the same way, but it's taking a bit more effort to get there now, then okay, I can't defend that. I can't deny that. That's fine. But that's not really who I'm going for with these kind of discussions. No one's going to shed a tear if killers are going, yeah, I'm still winning, but it's a bit harder now. It's like, okay, boo fucking who? The balance hasn't changed. You're just having to try a bit more now or something like that. And although that does technically mean the game would have gotten harder because it requires more effort to get the same result, I don't think that's something that is worthy of systemic changes. We need to nerf Survivor, we need to buff Killer, All these things, I think, are way too much of an overreaction to that. Now, if the actual outcomes of the match were changing as well, and that's really who I'm going for, people that are saying things like, I can't win anymore, gens are getting rushed too fast with these spawns, 5 gens are popping in 1 second. Obviously exaggerating for effect here, but a lot of people are making it sound like their games are unwinnable now, and I don't even think that's what MintSkull is saying. For all intents and purposes, from what I can see, what he's saying is he still has the capability of winning a lot of these games. He just doesn't want to have to try more, which I don't think is an insult on him. I respect people that don't go full sweat every match. I like that. I wish there was more of that. But my whole point is, he's not really who I'm going for these statements here. If he still has the capability to win and has to try a bit more, that's not a huge glaring issue, even though he is correct that it does mean the games are harder for him. That doesn't mean the games are needing a giant change or a systemic change that everyone else seems to be asking for. So for the most part, we don't disagree too heavily here. We're just doing a lot of splitting hairs on a topic that, again, for the most part, we kind of agree on. We're just talking about a bit different things, but I will definitely say objectively he is correct in the 4-man game, which is slightly more common now, is of course easier than the 3-man game. My point is that in those scenarios we were discussing with the, down to 20 seconds, the outcome is the exact same. Whether you have to try a bit more or a bit less, it's not warranting an entire systemic nerf to survive or a buff to killer from that. Next, let's go over the whole healing section. My whole point in my original video was that people are saying the healing meta has been buffed massively, but if you actually look at the math of things involved, it really hasn't changed very much. What's really happening is people are discovering shit that's been in the game for a very long time, and now they're suddenly using it, and people are having trouble adapting to it or just choosing not to, and because of that, they perceive the game's harder because either they're just not prepared for it, or they just don't know how to counter it yet, even though there are definitely things you can do. So I think me and MintSkull mostly agree here, and there aren't too many points in this whole section where we have, differences in our opinions. One thing he does bring up, though, that I do want to talk about, I didn't mention, was one of the main buffs to medkits that wasn't possible before without another perk, or you can use like Streetwise or Built to Last or whatever, but with the right add-on setup with Botany Knowledge, now you are able to get 2 heals instead of 1 heal. Again, things like Franklin still completely counter this, so if you bring the perks that deal with it, it's still not an issue, but that is true that you were not able to do that just by itself before. Again, you could bring other perks to supplement your medkit and make it possible, but now you can just do Botany and just be able to heal twice, which is huge. But it's really not that big of a deal because in order to do that, you need to use gel dressings, which is now an iridescent add-on. And you would have to run an iridescent add-on every single game, which you're just not going to be able to do indefinitely. Even if it's a short-term problem due to excessive blood points from the anniversary and things like that, it can't be a long-term problem because getting infinite iridescent add-ons is just not really a feasible thing. It's honestly a lot more feasible for killer because they have less iridescent things to go through. But survivors have a bunch of iridescent shit they have to deal with, and so the chances of getting gel dressings on any given web is a lot smaller than the chance of a killer getting iridescent head on Huntress or something like that. So the fact is, you can only do the double heal if you're specifically using gel dressings. That's the only add-on you can use in order to do that because you need to gain 24 additional charges, and the only way you can do that is gel dressings plus any other charge add-on. You can't use the weaker charge add-ons. It has to be gel dressings every single time. And my counter argument here would just be that's just simply not sustainable. If we're talking about mostly newer players or lower MMR or average players, casual players, that's what most of these discussions are about because everyone's saying the good players are totally fine, this is not a big deal, then we have to go along with the fact that these people are not going to have 62,000 iridescent add-ons. They're going to have a couple, die a lot, and use them very quickly. So yes, that is true that you can now get a double heal off of Botany Knowledge, but it's contingent upon you bringing the iridescent add-on every single game and also hoping the killer doesn't have Franklin's, which would just negate it entirely. Also, a quick little addition to that, if your argument is, well, actually, I can bring iridescent add-ons every game, therefore this Botany Knowledge this buff is insane, and now I can get two heals every match. Yeah, you could, again, do that already. Last patch, you could just bring a charge add-on and then a syringe and passively heal yourself in the same amount of time. There's no difference here. It's the exact same thing. You're just swapping gel dressings for a syringe now. It's still 2 heals. There's no difference. Another point that MintSkull brings up that I actually fundamentally disagree with, so much so that I might actually just say it's incorrect, is he's saying that healing meta-wise, if killers are forced to bring things like Franklin's, if killers are forced to react to this, doesn't that objectively mean that the game is harder because something is so strong or threatening that killers are forced to bring something to counteract that threat? And I would just say absolutely not. That is how the entirety of Dead by Daylight is built. People are getting tunneled a bunch, you got to bring Decisive Strike. People are getting slugged a bunch, you got to bring Unbreakable. Healing is getting insane, you got to bring Gift of Pain and Franklin's. That has been the entire game since 2016. It's been perks countering perks, metas countering metas. You having to adapt to whatever the current meta is at the time doesn't mean the game is harder. It just means you're now having to shift to adapt to whatever the most recent thing is. The thing is, I think for the past couple of months, there really hasn't been a super predominantly meta setup. I could think like finesse, like dramaturgy kind of a little bit, but there really hasn't been some like giant like circle of healing meta. Like, that was a thing that was just unanimously in every single game. And because of that, now that we have healing meta starting to crop up again, people are we had a brief vacation, I guess, from the norm of Dead by Daylight, which was there's always something that has to be countered. That is how the game is built. And he did actually bring this up a little bit by talking about slowdown perks. And slowdown perks are, I have to say, the definitive example of having to countering metas. Gen's going too fast in 2016, slap on slowdowns. You are basically required on most killers, or at least, anyone that's not B tier and above. Pretty much the bottom half of killers, you pretty much have to run slowdown or you're going to be in them for a rough time most of the time. And that's the exact same thing he's talking about. You are kind of required to do something because of the things that survivors do. That's you adapting to a meta. That's why slowdown perks exist, because you're adapting to gens going too fast and things like that. It's no different from the healing meta. You just have to adapt to a different thing now. That is the entirety of how DBD has functioned its entire lifespan, and I don't think this part makes too much sense. And the whole thing is, he also says a sentence that I think is just objectively untrue, because he's basing all of this on the assumption that adapting to a meta is a difficult thing to do.
If Scott's argument is that you need to adapt to the meta, doesn't that mean that objectively now killer is harder because we need to change our loadouts, which worked perfectly before this new meta?
It's hard for someone to have to adapt to a meta. The fundamental argument he's making there is just incorrect. There is zero difficulty involved with selecting a different perk. For example, you have the perk Thanatophobia. You love Thanatophobia or something like that. Right now, that perk would be stupid to bring because there's a healing meta and Thanatophobia requires people to be injured. So, not a very smart idea to bring that right now. It's not difficult for you to change that perk into Franklin's, or it's difficult to change it to Gift of Pain or Weeping Wounds. It's not difficult. You're just pressing a button. You can't apply the word difficulty to this because it's not hard to do that. Now, you could say it's unfun, inconvenient, annoying, whatever. There's a bunch of other words you can use to describe that scenario, but difficulty is not entering this equation at all. It has nothing to do with difficulty. This is just people not wanting to run things they don't have to, or they didn't have to previously because the meta in the past couple of months didn't have this. But now that it is happening, healing is back. We're going to have to see these changes. Then healing will die again. Something else will happen, and you'll have to adapt to the next meta. Like I said, this is just how the game functions, and it has nothing to do with the overall difficulty of the game. This is just how the game is built. It is not difficult to change a perk into another perk when you know by simply equipping that other perk, it will give you more value than the perk you had previously. And yeah, it sucks not being able to run what you want at all times, but welcome to Dead by Daylight. I don't want to have to run slowdowns and weaker killers. That'd be great. And I've had to do it for 8 years. It's just, you have to accept that's how the game works. So no, I don't think this is any different from what we're used to. This is how DBD is built. It's how it will unfortunately probably be forever. So I don't think there's any merit to this side of that actual argument. There is one part about the healing discussion that he said that I will 100% agree with, and that he said that healing metas statistically overall tend to really harm the weaker killers and not affect the stronger killers as much. Completely agree. I am not a fan of healing metas. Trust me. I have so many videos shitting on old circle healing, old green medkits. I am very staunchly against rapid healing metas, which is why you would think I would be really freaking out here about the botany buff and desperate measures buff and stuff like that. But, I looked at the math of it and found it really is not that big of a deal. It's not any different from what we're currently used to. And there's plenty of perks you can use to deal with these types of things. Some have intermittent success. Some might not work some games and some might not work others. And their perks might not work some games and others. But I understand that. But I do completely agree that healing metas overall tend to hurt the weaker killers more. But again, I'll say what I've said kind of recently in the past year. This is not a systemic problem with Dead by Daylight. This is the bottom half of the killer roster is just simply too weak problem. You don't make systemic changes to the game that fix it for the bottom half, because then the top half become oppressive. You need to make the weaker killers stronger so we can have more accurate comparisons. And he goes over this. He knows I've discussed this too, and we're on the same page here. But I did want to bring up, it is a very good point that healing metas disproportionately harm weaker players. So if you main Ghostface or something like that, you're going to feel this way harder than someone like me who's currently playing like Vecna, who's actually pretty solid right now. So it definitely hurts weaker killers more. But my main point is that's not a systemic problem with Dead by Daylight. That's that these killers are too weak problem, and the killers themselves need to be buffed, not the entire game changed around them. Next, spawn logic. Luckily, MintSkull and I pretty much completely agree with this, that the changes that make survivors all spawn together, it's pretty much objectively a buff to killer. This is really hard to interpret any other way than just making killer stronger. If you're less experienced, you might be able to interpret this differently, but I assure you, this is just better for killer overall. Even if you can't see it yet, it just simply is. Now, he did bring up a couple of points that I completely agree with. Currently, there's certain issues where it just doesn't work properly. Sometimes people will still spawn spread out without a shroud offering. Sometimes you'll still get like an awkward middle map spawn or something like that. These are kind of things that are just the game not functioning correctly at the moment. So I'm not really trying to include them in the discussion, because the game just occasionally bugs out and does shit it's not supposed to. This is how the game is supposed to spawn survivors together every single time. So I do agree they need to fix these bugs, and still the vast majority of the time survivors do spawn together, but I have noticed a few outliers every now and again where they don't, and no offering was burnt. I'm like, what the hell? That's not supposed to happen. So yeah, that's just straight up bugs, which will hopefully be fixed soon. Not a huge systemic issue with the game, but yeah, I agree, those do need to get fixed. He also brought up a potential problem in the future, because survivors now actually have an offering to make them force spawn spread out when previously didn't. Now, to combat that, killers have an offering that just negates any possible things the survivors can do to make that happen, but it also eats up the killer add-on slot. I originally was like, yeah, that is annoying. I don't want to have to burn that offering as killer every game. But I kind of realized, due to how the changes of the game have come over time here, it's sort of replaced map offerings, because map offerings don't really exist in the same way they did anymore. So instead of my default offering on killer being a sacrificial ward, which you kind of had to run every game, now my default offering is the Shroud of Negation, whatever it is, I forget the name of it. It's the one that makes it so survivors cannot burn any offerings that make them spawn spread out, so they're guaranteed to spawn together, assuming the game doesn't bug out. So that's just become my new default offering. And I can understand how having to use that every game is annoying, but to me, it's no different than having to use a sacrificial ward every game. It's the same thing, we've just shifted to something else. So it's more of a side grade than an upgrade, I will have to admit. But for the most part, you also have to realize everyone wants to run blood point offerings, including survivors. Survivors also want to run the blood point offering, so they're not really incentivized to run the spawn spread out offering either. So it's kind of an equal thing here. Obviously, the killer has less add-on possibilities or offering possibilities because there's only one killer and there's 4 survivors, but it still doesn't change the fact survivors are, one of them is going to have to bite the bullet if they want that to happen, and the killer can just as easily negate the entire team using them if that's the case. So I think it is overall an upgrade to killer, but I do agree that giving that offering to survivors is kind of annoying, but killers also have control of it too. So it's like an upgrade and then like a side grade. So it's like, okay, whatever. Not a huge deal overall. But for the most part, we do agree that survivors spawning together is just always good. Now, the final section of his video talks about why we might have some, kind of disconnected, I guess, experiences from each other, where he might be noticing a lot more difficulty and I'm not really noticing much of a difficulty change at all. So a couple of reasons that he brought up this might be possible is to killer selection. He thinks that I normally main good killers, which is true. I don't really main top tier killers. I main killers that are pretty good, like Nemesis and Wraith are pretty good. Currently playing Vecna, who's pretty good. I don't really main any like S tier killers or even like A plus tier killers or anything like that, but I main killers that are also not dog shit weak. I don't play Pig or Sadako or Doctor or Skull Merchant or any of these killers. And yeah, if you're playing those killers, the game is going to feel like shit. My argument there would be, though, it's always going to feel like shit if you're playing those killers. Those killers suck, and they need to get, buffed pretty massively, but I don't think you're going to notice a massive change in difficulty here, other than perhaps the healing meta if you choose to not equip perks to deal with it. So in that scenario, I definitely understand how if he's playing a bunch more weaker killers and I'm playing killers that are not top tier, but they are a bit stronger, then I might have an easier time. But I don't really think that has changed very much. Again, unless you are specifically choosing not to adapt to the healing meta, at which point, yeah, you're going to feel a lot more punished as a weaker killer, not stopping their heals or med kits or, giving them hemorrhage off hook for surgeons and things like that. So that can feel a lot worse. So it definitely is something that warrants discussion. The differing killer choices players make can wildly change what your experiences are in the game. And that's, like I said, been the case forever. So I don't think this is something new. This is something that's been the case forever. And maybe due to the healing meta can feel slightly worse if people aren't prepared for it. MintSkull also brought up that people are now using Survivor's hook states as another resource because, they have buffed the amount of time it takes to die on hook from 60 to 7 seconds, or at least per stage now. And because people might be going less next, you are now forced to utilize that resource, the Survivor's extended lifespan on the hook, instead of being dead, as an additional resource. And because of that, games can be harder because that resource previously would not have been there if they just try to kill himself on hook or they disconnected. And that can be true in some scenarios. Like I said, most of the time, if you get that early down, the match is mostly decided already. But there are scenarios where that can be true. But in this video, he uses an example and says it's a perfect example. So this is not just B-roll. He specifically says it's a perfect example of, survivors using their extended hook times, where normally they would be dead or disconnected, but because this is happening less frequently, they're using their extended hook times to make a match harder. And he says this match is a perfect example, but actually watch the footage here. And what's happening is he's essentially camping a dude on hook with the most mobile killer in the game. And then a bunch of gens pop around the map. And I feel like surprised, like, oh, the game's hard. It's like, you're just making a bad decision here. Like you just said, that the hook timers are really long. And yet you're choosing to proxy camp with the most mobile killer in the entire game. And then when gens pop, it's like, oh, the game's hard. The game's hard now. I wish this guy, if he wasn't here, the game was a lot easier. It's like, you're just making a really stupid play here. I mean, obviously, no offense to you. I make stupid plays all the time, but this is objectively a stupid play to make with the most mobile killer in the game. You could be chasing anyone else rather than just sitting here as a bunch of other generators pop. So I still understand what you're saying. I just think this example you use is a really, really bad example of it because it's more of an example of you just not making the correct play in that moment, not really that the game became impossible or anything like that. You just kind of made a bad macro decision in the actual match. The last section of MintSkull's video goes over potential changes that are happening to Survivor. We have seen it teased before with anti-slugging, anti-camp, anti-tunnel, all that stuff, the quality of life stuff, and people are already doom posting about it. It's already saying everyone's getting free Unbreakable, everyone's getting free Tenacity. There's no substance to any of these facts. There have been, leaks that they're testing stuff in Chaos Shuffle for it to go live. We know nothing about what they're actually doing other than there's some type of anti-slugging measure. For all we know, it could be if you're the last survivor in the game and everyone's been dead for 4 years that you can pick yourself up one time. We don't know. People are already doom posting about this. We have no idea what they're actually going to do. So I think using leaks and stuff like that of things that are potentially going to happen and then freaking out about it and saying the game's harder now is just a very silly thing to do. Let's talk about the changes when they actually happen. But before then, let's just see where it goes. We might have something where it's entirely not a big deal at all. Killers were worried about the face camp bar making it so that's it. You have to run across the map every game now. Face camp bar does almost nothing. You can proxy camp the shit out of people and it's barely an issue. So people have freaked out about things like this in the past and they end up being complete non-issues. So let's just see what happens with these changes first. Don't get me wrong. If they decide, hey, we're giving everyone Unbreakable for free now, I'll be right there with everyone saying, that's stupid. That's way too strong. Take that away. My point is, let's just be rational and wait to see what they're doing first before we start doom posting about it. Overall, though, that is it for my review of his review of my review of the review of the game being reviewed in a review space. And I hope you guys enjoyed watching. Again, I love MintSkull. I think his videos are great. I love debating. I'm pretty sure he likes having these discussions as well. Oh my God, what the hell was that? I need to go.